All right, so hello everyone and welcome to this webinar about the new release of Bonita platform. So the Bonita 7.8, the BCD 3.0 and BC add-on that is 1.1 version. Small introduction about myself. I do work as a technical evangelist at Bonisoft. My job is pretty much to ease the adoption. Anyway, I'm really happy to be here presenting this session today, and I will be covering the news of the latest release of the Bonita platform. I will be switching between presentation and demonstrations, just to make sure that you understand the points. I was just trying to show things directly on my screen, so that's why it's important for you to see my screen. All right, I think you know everything about how this session will go, so we'll just start straight away with the agenda. All right, so as I told you, we have 3 different things that has been released for the platform. It was on, I think it was on the 6th of December, so it's available from you. I think it's better to give you a quick reminder about the platform architecture, just to have the grounds. So if I take this little schema here on the left, you see we have the studio, and this is where most of the time where people will start building stuff, right? So we have the Git for the version control. So most of the time people or team collaborating will work on Git and synchronize with a repo. This Git repo will be loaded and will be edited directly using the Bonita Studio. So we do have, as part of the studio, 2 different things. We have the application designer, which is basically where you will define your processes and the data structure that you want to use. And on the other side, we also have something that is web browser oriented, that is the UI designer, where you will be able to design your UIs specific to the applications. So that's basically what we do with the studio. As soon as you define all of this and you have your application designed, what you can do is to deploy it on what we call the Bonita runtime. So you can see 3 different icons here. That's because the Bonita runtime will host the UI, will host the data with the BDM, and this little wheel is basically the processes that you may have in your applications. So the Bonita runtime will rely on what we call the Bonita storage. The storage is made of 2 different databases. The first one is for the engine of Bonita, so it's something that you're not supposed to edit. On the other side, we have the business data. So this is something that will be specific to your business, and the processes will basically interact with that directly. So that's something that is important for your application. On the other side, on the top here, you can see that we have all the UIs. So we have different kind of UIs. The first one is basically what is coming by default with Bonita. So it's called the Bonita portal, which is basically something that people will use to make sure you can administrate all the deployments and everything that you've built and that you are executing. In the middle, you can see that we have the living applications, which is basically all the UIs that you will build for your applications, your business applications. So that's something that a designer will design, and then when it will execute, it will be hosted by the runtime directly. And on the right, you also see that we can interact directly with the custom applications. So what we call custom applications are all these applications that you may have on your own, built on your own, not using Bonita, UI designer, etc. So we say that we can interact because we have APIs, obviously, and this is the way you will interact with the engine. All right, that was for the quick reminder. In terms of architecture, we also have the add-ons. 2 of them. We have the BCD and we have the BC. So I will start with the BCD to explain what it does. The first thing it does is basically making sure that you can provision some runtime, Bonita runtime. So the idea is to build this Bonita runtime on the cloud or on-premise, having the stack created automatically. So you will just have, to provide some information in the configuration files, and then BCD will be able to build the stack for you and to provision all the resources for it. So that's something that makes things much easier. For example, you will have a VM for for the application server, and you will have a VM for the database. Depending if you're using a different kind of vendor, you just need to change little things in the configuration file, and then it will be taken into account. So everything is simplified, and it's coming from this stack purpose of the BCD. But the BCD is not only that, it's also to build and to deploy whatever you are designing on the studio. So as soon as you have this Git repository with the source, this BCD will make sure that you can build these artifacts based on the source that you have designed. And as soon as you have built it, what you can do is to deploy on the specific platform, specific runtime that you have. So that's the second purpose of the BCD. And then we have the second add-on, which is entirely different. The main purpose of this one is really about artificial intelligence. And the idea is to make sure that we have a specific database that will be kind of an extraction of the data that we have from the Bonita runtime, but it will be stored in a specific way that is optimized for artificial intelligence. So here we have an elastic search database, and this is a NoSQL database, so it's much faster with documents. And then we have a specific service for that with APIs that can be used by other kind of applications. Typical applications will be some people who wants to track the efficiency of an application, and also to make sure that things are going right, and to maybe gather some recommendation about how or what should be done to meet some targets, for example. So that's the whole purpose of the BC add-on. All right, so that's the big picture. I think it was interesting to take the time to discuss that. And we'll start with the Bonita 7.8, which is the main product and the main purpose of our platform. All right, so what changed with the 7.8 version of Bonita? The main change is actually something that I guess you will like, is this application project. So what happens is that now we have on the studio, we do have a project explorer view that is coming on the left. So you see that directly here. The idea is really to have a full arborescence of artifacts you're working on. So this is something that will likely be closer to a developer experience, and this is done on purpose. The idea is to shortcut also all these menus that we had on the top, having contextual menus directly from the left. So you could double click on an element, have see the big picture of the artifacts you're working on for a specific project. So everything is made much easier compared to what we had before, or at least it's more efficient. So one thing is that the scope of this project would be basically something specific to a business. So if you're working on a project, usually you associate some business, that would be some applications. But one limitation we have today is that we have one BDM per project. I can show you that actually. I will just show you my studio. And let me put that. I guess you see that on the screen. So I just opened the studio, and you can see here we have this arborescence. So we have different types of artifacts. That's the categories you see here. And for each of them, you will see all the elements that we have as part of this. Here it's a Git repository. So the project is a Git repository, and I have all the resources over there. So as you can see, there is only one BDM. The good thing is that if you double-click, you can access directly to the edition of them, which was a bit more complex before. For the example of the BDM, we had to go development, BDM, and then go to define. So it was free clicks, and now we just have to double-click here, and then we have access to it. So everything is much easier to access and to edit. If I take, for example, the application data, This will be directly integrated here. If I open one diagram, maybe that makes better sense to you, you will see that we still have the entire perspective as usual. The only thing that we have is this panel on this Project Explorer on the left. Good thing about this contextual menus is that if we right-click, you will see that we have specific actions accessible for all of them. So here, for example, I can duplicate and I can deploy this particular process that I have in my diagram. I can export, I can validate. Everything is made, as a shortcut, if you want. So this is really something that makes things much faster when you develop, because you can just right-click and have access to all the actions associated to this object, which was not really the case before. Again, what we had to do is to go for the action and then select what kind of item we want to apply the action for, which was not the best way to do it. What else? I guess one thing that you may have noticed is these little icons here. So the first one is that we can create multiple projects. Today, your project is basically a Bonita repository. This is a the idea is to have multiple projects that we could see from the Project Explorer. But so far, we have a limitation on this, and we do have only one project. But down the road, for the future release, that is the target, having multiple projects that you can see here and that you can break down. And this switch project here shows that you can switch a project because, again, today we can only have one project loaded. So if you want access to another project, you will have to switch the project, which is basically, again, this access of the Bonita repository feature that we had before. So today we cannot see multiple projects, but that definitely something that might change. That will change. At least that's the objective. All right. Next element will be the model container. So now we are still in the studio, but on the UI designer side of it. And we do have a new model container. We wanted to make sure we can have this model dialog on the page. This is a feature that was requested a lot. That definitely simplifies the navigation design because we don't have to use any kind of tricks. So about the use cases, you will likely use this kind of model, and actually that's an example of it here on the bottom. Let's say you want to see details about a specific item you want to select, let's say from a table, or if you have a button like more or something like that, then you will be able to pop up this model dialog and provide the information from there. So that makes all the pages much smaller, because before we had to provide all the details directly on the page, or to trick to show and hide stuff, which was maybe not the best way to do it. So you have this option now to use this specific model dialog to show more details, to provide some alerts or notifications to the end user, or to also provide some additional information like help or best practices when you work on a specific form, for example. So that's about it. Another feature from UI Designer is this metadata. So when you go and edit a page, the good thing is that now you will be able to change from page to form. So this is something that happened many times to people. Sometimes you had a form and then you created a form and then you figure it out that this is not a form anymore. What I'm doing is a page. That was a mistake. So now you can do that. You can save as or change the type directly from the button here. So that's definitely helpful. For the metadata, we just make sure that we have extra information about the page. So the first one is what we call the name, the display name, which is basically different than the technical ID. The technical ID is kind of restrictive in terms of characters. You cannot use special characters, for example, because it's used for the technical purpose. But the display name will will be unrestricted, so you can really have a nice name that makes sense to the business people or for yourself as a developer. And you can also add some description on it, so that makes sense, because sometimes you just have a name on the page, but it's not good enough to understand what's inside, or maybe what needs to be performed next, these kind of things. So it's always better to have some kind of description that you can use, and this is what we are doing here. So this is something that you will be able to use. All right, that was about the UID. In terms of portal, we did have a few changes. The first one, and it's actually more about technology changes or upgrade, if you want. So the idea behind the scene is to make sure that we use the UI designer to create the page that you see by default, and make sure that at some point they are shared, and that can be extended in case it makes sense. For this release, we did the BPM services page. This is the page you see on the bottom here, which is the one that you use to make sure you can start and stop the BPM, the services. We basically re-implemented it using the UI designer. So that's definitely some improvements. Maybe not that much today, but it's important for you to understand that we are making progress on this. For the other release in the future, we'll have new pages. So I guess we'll keep you posted on this. But down the road, it's not that important for you as a daily use, because this is the exact same functionalities that you will retrieve in the page. So there is nothing that will be new or nothing that will be dropped. That should be the exact same scope. So you should not see the difference if we do well our job. All right, that was about the portal. When it comes to the engine, we do have a lot of performance improvements that have been done during this release. The first one is to reduce the temporary folder reads and writes. We had extensive use of this in 7.7 and before. So we dramatically reduced that. So that means that we don't make so much reads and writes, which is dependent of the file system. And obviously that makes things much faster. Regarding the number of the DB requests, the same. We really reduce the number of requests that we need to execute a specific work unit. So work unit is really, the little elements that we use to execute something on the engine. So it's really low level. And because we made it more powerful and optimized, obviously that will have a really good impact in all your engine and run times. Also, we have a better resource management of the authentication. So especially for the REST API, we basically made sure that it's more optimized. So when you authenticate, do something and log out, if you do that a lot of times, and that happens if you have a lot of external systems, we basically make that much more optimized. So internally in the engine. So there is no difference in the use, but the engine will go much faster doing the exact same thing. So that will be nice for you in terms of integration. Also, we have dependencies loading at startup that has been optimized. So that means that everything is stored in database today for Bonita. Even the jar and all the process dependencies. So all of this needed to be extracted from the database at startup and loaded in memory to make sure that we can execute everything. So this is something that has been optimized, and now the startup is much faster than before. So that's something that you might notice when you will start or restart your platform. Also, last but not least, we have an optimization of the process instance deletion, which is really important for many people. Sometimes you have so many process instances that you want to make sure that you purge them, or sometimes you have really big process instance and you will reach out some timeout exception. So that's something that we noticed, and we tried to make sure we fix it, and this release will come with that. So basically the idea is you will be able to delete much faster the process instance. So you should not have any issue with the timeout exception anymore. The only drawback about that is because the slowness was not really the execution itself, but it was the events that we triggered based on this deletion. Let's say you delete a process instance. This process instance has maybe 500 tasks that has been performed inside. It means that maybe we need something like 500 events to be triggered and processed. So the engine was basically struggling doing that. Depending on the load you have, that can have some impact, depending on the load of the engine. So yeah, we just reduced this amount of events. If you use this event in your application or in your integration, it is possible to configure the platform to use the legacy implementation. So it will be activated by default, but you can roll back and use the implementation that we used to have before. So it's not a problem if it's not compatible and you don't need this performance improvement. You will be able to roll back to the old one. But it doesn't mean that you just can keep that forever. This kind of integration is wrong because we deprecated that for a long time, and at some point it will be removed in the product. So I just want to make sure it's not the warning, but consider improving the way you interact with the engine, because at some point you will not be able to leverage this anymore. That's important. Okay, so that's about the performance. Let me see. Yeah. Now, next subject will be extensibility or integration, if you prefer. So basically, the idea is we have this SSO, and we can do a lot of things like CAS and these kind of things. But with Windows, most of the time you use Kerberos or some databases. So we identified this need, and we thought that it was nice to have an implementation for the service on Bonita. So we do support now SSO with Kerberos, the Kerberos protocol, and we do make sure that you can configure that per tenant. So if you have multiple tenants on your Bonita runtime, you will be able to specify the use of Kerberos only for one of them or all of them. It depends on what you're doing. But yeah, the main idea is that you have access to Kerberos when you use SSO on the Bonita platform, which is a great achievement. Another extensibility integration subject is the callback API that we have improved. So, when you work on some process, sometimes you have some execution that will be quite long to perform or to execute, and sometimes this will be done on external systems. Let's say content management system, or if I take this example here, that will be some RPA. RPA is a sequence of tasks that may take some few days, maybe. So that's definitely not something you can do directly with a connector today, because a connector is synchronous. So what you would like to do is to have this asynchronous call that should be performed from the connector, and then you should expect some kind of a callback from your external system that will say, well, the job is done, and that might be days after the initial request. So, before, what we were doing is basically we will start the job with the connector, and then we'll do some pooling to check the job status on the external system. So this was obviously not the most optimized way to do it, and that triggered few issues. So the idea was really to make sure that we provide some kind of a callback API for the external system to call back Bonita when something is done, and that is nicely integrated with the processes. So this is basically the solution of the BPMN message that we used, and we have an API to send the message directly from REST API now. So what we call the callback API is basically the send message REST API that you can leverage from your external system to trigger a specific catch event. So that's the perfect example. Again, the RPA. If you want to launch a robot, then you launch a robot from this task. The robot will perform maybe for a few days, and at the same time, you still need to work on other things like the complete manual information task. that can be performed manually at the same time. So you basically do that and wait at the same time that the robot is doing its job, and when it's done, then you can move forward. So that's really a nice integration with the process and BPM overall. Talking about RPA, we do integrate UiPath connector. So these are brand new connectors. The good thing is that now what you can do is to start a UiPath job directly from a connector. You can add a new job to UiPath queue, so that's specific to UiPath, and you can get a job status if you want. So you can see here there is a new category that is called Robotic Process Automation, so RPA, and we do have these free connectors provided and supported on Enterprise Edition. But obviously these connectors will trigger some jobs, some robots, and this robot at some point will come back to Bonita. And for this, UiPath is also working on an implementation on their side to perform Bonita specific activities. We do have free Bonita activities in the UiPath marketplace. So this is the studio of the UiPath. We will be able to do the callback, for example. So that's the callback I just discussed before. We'll be able to make this REST API call to send the BPMN message to at the end of a job or something, to make sure that the process will have the information as needed. We can start a new case and execute a human task. In terms of release, it should be before the end of the year. And this will be compatible with the version, if I come back here, the version 2018.3. All right. Other few things. So the ID improvements. So what we do have here is really for performance and usability. We used to have some kind of a generated code around the proc file, which is the diagrams, where you define your processes. So that's basically, this file is kind of an XML, but this XML was really moving a lot depending on what you do on the process. And sometimes it was not really necessary or optimized. So that's something that we worked on because when you want to do a diff between two different versions of the process, it's better to have only the business side that changed, not really something that is specific to generated code. So that's something that we wanted to improve, and this has been done with this version. That's definitely a step forward. It's not complete, but that's definitely helped. And we also worked on the ID of the UID artifacts. So this technical ID, now we have something that is meaningful, so that's something that will be helpful. Another feature that is coming with the BDM is this in clause. So if you need to use, if you want to filter some information from the database of your BDM and want to filter on specific values, then you can provide this list directly in the in clause, which was not possible before. So any query that you build for the BDM can use this in clause now. That's nice. And we also upgraded the security. So especially for the Tomcat, we have a new version of the Tomcat that provides some upgrades on the security. So that's something that might be helpful depending on what you're working on. All right, so that's pretty much what we have new with the 7.8 of Bonita. Now I will switch to the version BC, the BC 1.1. So overall, what we did on BC 1.1 was to create new REST APIs. So that's something that is helpful. Before, we were not able to share the information with external systems or some UIs that you would have been building yourself. So if you want to do that, now you can access that. Also, we created new application pages. Before it was something quite minimal. Today we have a page for analytics, we have a page for pooling, for configuration of pooling, and we also have the health check. So the health check is really not more than just a status of the health of the platform, of the add-on. So that's something that is useful for ITs, and you can actually reuse what's done inside this this specific page to do some check on your own systems if you want with metrics and so on. We do upgrade the security. We have HTTPS, which was really blocking, and we also use, it's missing here, it's a JWT, which is, these tokens for authentication. So everything now is set up. So in terms of security, we are much better. And we also have multiple languages now. We had only English. Now we have French and Spanish. So that's a good upgrade. All right, let's switch to the BCD now, which is the second add-on, version 3.0, released a few days before. As I told you, one of the aspect of BCD is to provision and creating a stack, for example. So, and the second one is to deploy a Bonita application that you have designed on this stack that you have provisioned. So this is really the big picture here. I don't think I will go over everything because we have specific webinars and documentation about that. It's not really the purpose here, but the main things that will change is that we do have Azure now, the cloud. So that means that what you were able to do on AWS, you can do it on Azure, on Linux stack only. So that's a limitation, but it will change in time. That's a first step. We are able to create a stack directly on Azure, and we are able to have the runtime running well on Linux. We do not provide any Windows or stuff like that, which might be the case why you are on Azure. But again, this is something that will change soon, likely 2019. We will be able to run on Windows stack, which will make a big difference. All right, so that's the main change, and we also have parameters files, and we will discuss that further. All right, so I guess I spoiled you a little bit here. So yeah, I didn't discuss the Jenkins. We package Jenkins in the BCD controller, so you have access to it directly by default. That's why we provide new commands. That's why also we can build and deploy directly using aliases. And we are compliant with Jenkins job DSL, which is nice because you will be able to reuse a lot of things from there. That's definitely something you want to look into to build and deploy in the right way using our tools, especially BCD. All right, so the second point is about the Bonita runtime provisioning, and I guess I already covered that. We will be able to provision on Microsoft Azure Cloud with Linux only. And also something that I didn't discuss is the fact that we have an official registry now on Docker. This is called k.io. This is basically what we have is a registry of the Bonita runtime on it. So the main benefit of this is that before the BCD controller was packed with the the image, or it had to download it from Bonitasoft website or Bonitasoft hosts. Today, because we have this in a specific registry, and this registry is on the cloud, everything will be much faster when we try to create a new or deploy new runtime, Bonita runtime. So that's minutes of difference. So that makes a big difference when you're making some automatic testing and this kind of things. Your Bonita runtime will be deployed much faster. So that's really nice. Also, another point is the deployment of the living application in production. So again, this is the parameters I was talking about. Now we have this bconf file that is an archive with parameters inside specific to a process. And this is to enable us to work with multiple environments in efficiency. You need it to build the process specific to environments to have the associated bar file. It's not the case anymore. Now you can just build your process, have the bar file, but this bar file is basically naked. You don't have any parameters inside. So the only thing that you need to build at this stage to complement it for an environment is to build the parameters associated to this environment for this process. So that's completely simplified, and it's much more powerful and efficient. Also, we do have automatic renewal on the Bonita license, which is really needed. The idea is that you have things on the cloud, maybe you have a lot of different stacks, and they all use some licenses. You want to renew automatically, right? Most of the time, that's what you would like to do without any interruptions. So that's something that will come with the BCD version 3.0. What it means is that basically you will not have to manually create a new license and deploy it on your environments, which can be tricky when you have, let's say, multiple productions or multiple qualifications, and you have to change them, all of them at the same time. And for this, we have a new command, so you will be able to leverage that. All right, so this is just to explain you the parameters, again, with a little schema. So what we used to have was to build something for the application, and then we would have this bar file for each process. What we have now is, let's say, well, we have built, everything is provided as an application archive. So all the application artifacts will be provided in a zip file now. But again, it will be naked. It won't be environment specific. And then you can combine it with a specific bconf that is this time specific to the environment. And then, the BCD will be able to create environment specific to test and deploy the application with the processes and so on, with the parameters specific to the environment. And just one thing that you need to understand is that the bconf, again, is an archive. And this is an archive because it will be split into multiple, files. Today, we only have one, which is called parameters.yaml. And the idea is that you have all the tooling from the BCD to extract and merge these files with parameters. So that's today we do have only one file, but and one file in one archive, so it's a bit confusing. But this is only the first step. We have this archive because along the in the long run we'll have multiple files here. So today we only have parameters of the process, but tomorrow we will have the actor mapping and so on. So that might be different files, and that's why we have the archive. So we just have the whole structure for the coming release and modifications. All right, so I guess that's time for demonstration. What I will do is show you. So I have this little repository here, and you see that I have the console. So it's a vacation request example. So I got that from GitHub, the example from GitHub. I just migrated this to 7.8. And so you can definitely go and check directly from the Bonita GitHub. You will find this example. What I will do with this example is to make sure that I deploy it on Azure. What I have done, so I will show you my what I've done so far is just to create and deploy the stack. So I made sure that I have the stack on Azure, so I can show you what I have so far. I did that before because it takes a bit of time, it takes a few minutes, so I thought it was not necessary to wait all this time and better discuss with you. So this is what I have. I created the stack. I deployed the Bonita runtime on it. So everything is good on Amazon, on Azure, sorry. And you see here that I have my Bonita runtime, and there is nothing on it. So if I go here, install, which is coming with the default, you see that I'm technical and I have absolutely no users. So there is really nothing here. What I do is to I will build the application. All right. All right. So what I will do here is I have my Docker with BCD controller. This BCD controller created a new stack on Azure. Deploy the Bonita runtime on it. And now what I will do is I have access to my Git repository here that is called Bonita Vacation Management Example. And what I will do is just use the BCD to build it for a specific environment. So I will use the environment qualification here. So if I launch that, it should go through, and we should have a zip and a bconf specific to the qualification this time, qualification environment. Usually all of this is done directly from your CI/CD. Here I do that manually just to show you how, to better understand how it works. But all right, so as you can see, what has been created here from the build is, so it's basically creating in the targets because it's a Maven project. But as you can see from my repository, I do have two files that has been generated. One zip, which is basically all the artifacts specific to the application that I want to build, and the bconf, which is all the informations, all the parameters specific to the qualification environment. So here, what I want to do is to deploy it. I will just replace this this number here because it's specific to the name of the file that I just did. I don't know why it's doing 2 times. Okay, that should do it. Okay, and I need to change that. So basically, this specific command is to say, well, I want to deploy this zip file, which is again all the artifacts specific to this application, and I want to do that using a specific environment parameters, which is the bconf that we just created. So here it will connect, the BCD will connect to my remote application, my remote runtime that is running on Azure, and it is supposed to deploy everything. So you see it's connecting to the 4676 SON, and it's deploying everything. So it deployed the BDM and everything that was part of the zip file that has been built from the previous command. And here it's a process, for example. All right, so here it's deployed, right? I just want to show you that now we have Walter Bates because everything has been performed, even the organization. So here you can see that now I can log in as a user that is called Walter Bates. I have my processes. And one of them is so if I go through the administrator point of view, my process, for example, this one, cancel a vacation, you can see that I have all my parameters here, right? These parameters are coming from the bconf. So what I will do to finish this demonstration is just to show you that you can extract this information from the bconf, the parameters. I will just do the same here. What I want to do is to extract this information from the bconf. So what I do here, you see the command BCD living app extract conf. So that's a new keyword, a new parameter. I just provide the bconf that I want to extract the information from. So here it's the one that I just created. If I run that, the BCD will do the extraction. So you can see all of this here is just some logs, but it created a file that is called parameters YAML in the Bonita Continuous Delivery. So fortunately, I have it open here. You can see that it's reloaded. This is because it just has been created. And you can see that this is how it looks like. All the parameters will look like that. So that's the parameters.yaml. And you can see, you recognize maybe the name of the processes. So for each process, so that's the name here, for each process, you will have all the parameters, process and version, by the way. So you have all the parameters. I could change one of these values and just redeploy, and it will be deployed again. And that will be good, like that. Another example that I just kept for you to understand better is we do have the possibility to have global parameters now, which is really interesting. Let's say you have multiple processes with email server use SSL, which is the case here. For example, in my process cancel vacation request, I had this particular parameter that is false. But the idea is I can use this global parameter value, which is true, in other process by default. If here I just kept this email server use SSL as part of this particular process cancel vacation request because I wanted a false value. If I drop this, I will have the true value for the parameter of the cancel vacation request by default. But because I want a false value, I want to override this true value that is part of the global parameters. And for that, I just override the information directly in the process if it's necessary. So the good thing again is that you could change that and just redeploy. So that's definitely something you will be using when you want to change some parameters, make sure that maybe it's coming from your version control and deploy that with this new version of the parameters. So that's something that will be helpful. And this is it for me. I mean, this is all I had. I guess I will just try to answer any questions you have. All right, so someone is talking about BDM. It looks like it's better. I should have reminded what it is. So BDM is called Business Data Model. So that's something that is part of your studio and that you can have in your runtime. So when you have an application, most of the time you're relying on some data. So the good thing is that you want to have some structure in this data and you need to define it. So that's what we provide as part of the BDM. You could have your own database and have connectors to connect to it as part of the process execution. That is totally doable. But another option we provide out of the box to simplify all this administration of a database for the business data is the BDM as part of the Bonita by default. So here you can see we can define the structure. So for example, here in my example, I have vacation. I have request, and for this request, then I have some information specific to it. So that's definitely something you might want to use. The nice thing with the BDM compared to regular database using connectors and so on is that everything is well integrated because we host this database and we handle that as part of the runtime. Bonita is able to integrate nicely operations and so on that you might want to do on this data that is based on this structure. If I have an example here, let me see. So here, for example, I have a business variable, two of them actually, that will rely on these two elements, these two what we call business objects that we have defined for this BDM, for this application. And what you can do here is do specific execution. So here in operations, most of the time you can do things. See, in this particular task, for example, we set the vacation request status to processing cancellation. So we just reuse this business variable that we have defined, which has a specific type. And in the operations of this task, so that's basically something performed at the end, we set the status. This set status is coming from the fact that we know the data structure of your BDM, so we can basically integrate nicely in the studio and make it much easier for you to design something. So that's definitely the main benefits of the BDM, along with obviously the administration that you don't have to do anymore. The only thing you need to do is to create a database, and that's pretty much it. Bonita will create the tables. It will interact with this database automatically at the execution time without you even noticing. All right, so that was for the first question. I had a question about compatibility. So the compatibility, yes, everything is compatible. The only thing that might be trouble, you remember this V6 form, which is something that is super old and that has been deprecated for years. If you are still running on 7.7 with this kind of V6 forms and you want to keep them on and migrate to 7.8, that won't be possible. The UI designer is the only option for now on. There is no V6 form anymore. V6 form we're using GWT, which is like a super old and buggy and unmaintained technology. So we decided a long time ago to remove that. So now it's really the time. We deprecated that, but now we really remove it. So if you try to migrate some design that you have done with V6 forms, these forms won't be migrated and won't be imported inside your studio. So if you migrate these designs, you will have compatibility issues, but that's the only thing. Other than that, we still have this, forward compatibility as usual. Yeah, I have a question about multiple projects. So as I said, it's possible to have multiple projects, but it's done, having multiple repositories. So here, if I check on the studio, I have one project on one repository, Bonita repository. So what we would like to have is multiple projects in a single repository. So that's something that will come maybe in the future, but so far it's not done yet. But again, it's just one step forward. And I have some kind of the same issue, some kind of the same question about dependencies. Is there, the possibility to have dependencies between the projects and between all the artifacts? How to deal with that? That's definitely, again, something we are working on, making sure that when you build something, we have full arborescence of the artifacts. So far, it's pretty flat, but at some point it will become much more dynamic, and things will rely on other things. And when you will be refactoring something, or when you will be deploying something, we'll be able to make it much more efficient. Let's say the main use case of dependencies between the projects and the artifacts inside these projects. It's let's say you want to deploy some new version of an application, and you just changed one form. You're not expecting to build everything and to deploy everything again, because this is just one form that changed, right? So this will definitely help to identify this difference between versions of applications, and to deploy only what is the different. So that will be helpful. I have a question about the add-ons, if they are also available in Community Edition. This is not the case. Here I was really assuming that you had an Enterprise Edition, so that's actually a good question. The add-ons are not part of the Community Edition, but the Enterprise Edition. So you need an Enterprise Edition to have access to these add-ons. Yeah, I guess that answers the question. Okay, do not see any other questions so far. So I guess I will just stop the session here. I guess it's just time to thank you for your participation today, and I guess I will see you for different subjects in the near future. I wish you have a good day, and talk to you soon.